Here's a pitch I wasn't expecting. The Shape of Water meets Stranger Things. Now, I know Lindsay Ellis herself, the author, of course, of the work we are talking about today, probably wouldn't agree with this pitch of her book, which is actually quite understandable. There's a lot more to her writing than just The Shape of Water meets Stranger Things. But that is the pitch that came to my mind as I wrapped up the end of Axiom's End, and I think it's a good attention grabber. I also think it's a good jumping off point, so that's what I'm gonna go with. I think that I have to say, or at least acknowledge, that I am, and have been for a while, a pretty big fan of Lindsay Ellis's works. This is her first book that has been published, but she has been making video essays for quite a few years now, and they are my favorite thing that I am subscribed to on YouTube. The book I will be talking about today is Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. I don't have a physical copy, I only have the Kindle version because that's what I bought. I pre-ordered it almost immediately after it was available for pre-order. I actually, prior to buying and even reading the book, had very little idea about what it was about. The only thing I think I was aware of prior to opening this book and starting to read it was the setting. So with all of that in mind, I was so very pleasantly surprised. It's not that I had low expectations necessarily, because I did not. It's more that I had no expectations. I was in a weird place between, oh, it's a book written by a YouTuber, which historically has not gone well. I don't think that there's any that I can think of, even outside of the character of nonfiction, like fiction books written by YouTubers that did anything but frustrate the absolute hell out of me. So with this one, I didn't really know what to put my expectations at, because there was that, but then there was also the fact that I know Lindsay Ellis's work and I know that she is a very competent content creator. It was weird because with that, with like what I know of her and the fact that I'm a fan, I wanted to raise my expectations, but with what I know about YouTube and YouTuber books, I wanted to lower my expectations. So going into this, I just really had no expectations. Even still, with baseline, no expectations, no idea what I was getting myself into, I was very pleasantly surprised with this novel. Before I spoil too much of my thoughts and feelings on the novel, let's go ahead and get into it. First, I just want to get the things I didn't like out of the way. And you might be thinking, things that you didn't like? What are you talking about? And that's valid. Full disclosure, I keep on saying that, but full disclosure on my list of disliked items, they are nitpicky as hell at best. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. So these are things that I did notice that I was not a fan of, but do keep in mind that all of them are very minute things, especially in the grand scheme of the things that I did like, which we'll get into in a minute. So what are the things that I didn't like? The uncertainty of the character's sexuality. There's a sentence in this book where the narration talking about our main female character says that she had been going through a breakup with her girlfriend. And I think that any author in the 21st century would know well enough not to put girlfriend there to mean like girl space friend anymore. It just doesn't work, but also there is no spaces, girlfriend, one word. So I was actually really excited about that because of reasons, and it never really got any exploration or further indulgence into anything about it, which is by all means fine. I don't need everything spelled out. And I know that this is something that can get addressed in the sequel as well. It can be explored. The reason that this is on the list is not necessarily because it did something wrong, but it's more because I think it could have added interesting context to the relationship between Cora, our main character, and Ampersand, another character. Saying that, I understand that leaving it open leaves more room for the reader to fill it in for themselves, and that might be more beneficial in some ways to be able to project, I guess, into the story better. So I'll leave this point saying that this is not something that even remotely harmed my reading experience. It's just something that I thought would have been interesting to engage in within the context of the story that follows. My second point is probably the only dislike that actually holds any effect in my reading experience. It was the only thing that actually not hindered. It didn't hinder me in my reading experience, it just gave me a pause, and it's still pretty small, so. But the suspension of disbelief with the tech in this novel. And it's hard to go into this one fully because I acknowledge that the things that I am complaining about added to both the story and the characterization of the aliens. And I also acknowledge that without these tech, a lot of the things that happen in the story would have been a lot harder to come to. Still, the transportation tech within this world, just to me, it felt like it existed on a different and slightly higher level of necessary disbelief suspension than anything else up to that point. So it was a bit jarring because a lot of the sci-fi extraterrestrial stuff had already started to happen, and so the suspension of disbelief had already been swept up, and I was really engaged in it. And then there was just a couple things that were introduced about, I want to say 60% through the novel, that just desired a bit higher of that suspension of disbelief. And I don't even know specifically how to fix this other than to introduce a middle ground between what already existed and then what was introduced later. And even then, I do want to acknowledge that it wasn't wasn't that jarring. It was a very minor thing, and it barely affected my reading experience. It was just still something that I noticed, so I thought I would bring it up. Are you ready for my third and final complaint? Because I really don't think that you are. My third and final thing. The only other complaint that I could find about this book while reading it was one oddly worded sentence. That's it. The sentence is about 60% through the book. I don't have pages on my Kindle version, but it's in block 3928 of 6430, and a sentence is simply, "You can talk to me about me anything you want." That's all I got, which is actually remarkable because that's me being top tier nitpicky. 3 things, that's all I could find wrong with this book. With that now fully out of the way, let's get into the good stuff. My overarching statement is that this is a good book. It is interesting, it is thought-provoking, and it is engaging, retaining originality while also engaging with a common conflict found in both novels and movies alike. It is everything a first book from an author can hope to be, and like I said before, I was pleasantly surprised without having any low expectations. So to spare time and sanity, I will only be going over the things that really stuck out to me as top tier attributes to this fictional work. Things I liked first and foremost was the setting. I was only pages in before I was like, this is good. This is a good choice. The choice to diverge from the usual, think Stranger Things, think Super 8, think E.T., etc., alien narrative in the 80s, and push forward into a post-9/11 America provides such a deeper and much more adult narrative just right out the gate. The post-9/11 existence within this book, the subcontext within 2007, it is just there. It's everywhere. And for me, that provided a very interesting new outlook onto, again, what I've already said, a very common conflict explored in literature and visual media alike. The setting means that it is also still nostalgic, but refreshing all the same. The 2007 setting allowed for themes to be breached in ways that I don't know if an 80s or 90s background would have allowed. And that goes back again into the post-9/11 narrative and the existence of the 2000s and the nostalgia there, of course, but also the conflicts and President Bush and what was going on and the fact that nobody trusts the government anymore. It's all very laid out, and I feel like it has a much better grasp on a lot of concepts that could never be fully engaged with or even subtextualized into a novel like this with the same characters, same story that was set in a different time period. So I loved the setting. I was a big fan of that through and through. Second thing that I really liked was Cora. She's the main character. Her existence in itself as a main character is already venturing outside of the gate of normality with these kind of stories. It ventures very quickly outside of the naivety of children in the face of the other and or impending threat of doom that we see a lot in, again, things like, I'm so sorry to keep bringing up Stranger Things, but Stranger Things and E.T. and Super 8. To cast an adult woman as a lead allows for an array of subtext and themes to exist that are not readily apparent. There's a lot going on here, but still that can exist that would not exist with children as the lead, or even a young child, a young girl as the lead. In description, Cora is the daughter of Nils, a man famous for pulling the curtain back on the government. She has inherited a question authority complex from her father, and she has sometimes a selfish streak and struggles in life. There were undertones, and again, there's a lot of subtext in this book, and I love that not everything is just spelled out for you, of her struggling with some mental illness, but even still, I feel like a lot of the times in books that allow a character to have mental illness, they're like, oh, well, you have to have a big reason, and so then they give a million reasons, or they give one big reason, and it just undermines what it is like to live with mental illness. So to just have her have a very natural backstory, a very natural upbringing with things that of course would hurt somebody, but still allow her to exist in a space where you can read these things in her was very interesting and a lot more engaging than a lot of other characters that I have had to read stories through the minds of. Another thing she has is she has abandonment issues, and she speaks without thinking in ways that cause pain sometimes, which now that I'm saying that all out loud sounds way too relatable. Where was I? What was I saying? Oh no. Okay, so the point of all of what I was just saying there was that I've read characters with similar aspects, similar parts, just similar backgrounds of Cora, and the emphasis was always wrong, and the grasp for pity of the character was always very overbearing. Cora feels like a person, like a real person. Her voice is never too much, but is still there, and she's very competent as a main character. Her decisions and actions progress the plot very naturally, while also not being frustrating or dumb. She is not one of those, I'm gonna run into the building, even though there's a murder in there, just so the plot can continue kind of characters, and for a female lead, that's actually really refreshing. I appreciate both the way that Cora was written and the way that she was easy to engage with. I like Cora, but perhaps my favorite aspect of Cora is that canonically, for 90% of this narrative, she looks like a train wreck. She is dirty in whatever clothes were available at the time, no matter what that means. Her hair is a mess, she's running around, and I am here for it. I was always waiting for that scene that always comes in books like this, especially when the lead or one of the main characters is a female, where they go and they buy new clothes and they take a shower and they bathe and they're like, oh, I feel better now. Because I feel like that exists in every kind of narrative where the characters are running around and one of them is supposed to be a woman, and it just didn't come. There was one part where she kind of took a shower, but she had to like put on the old clothes. I was very appreciative of that. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Male gaze, where this brings me to my next point, which is actually the realism of the novel. It takes precedence over attractiveness, and this is not just in regard to Cora. I think it's very apparent in Cora and her appearance and her life before the events of this book, and even in her ongoing relationships over the course of the book. But it is in everything, especially in the construction of the sci-fi elements, which leads to, of course, the next point, the alien design. Being an avid viewer of Lindsay Ellis's content means that at this point, I am pretty well versed in her opinions in regard to storytelling mediums. As such, I do not know if this added to or took away from my reading experience of her book. Certain themes and ideas felt very apparent to me where they otherwise may not have, and this may mean that I got more out of a first read, but it also may imply that I did not get a pure reading experience. For example, the alien design. Having watched her video essays on aliens in film and their designs, I am aware of her take on the othering of aliens in storytelling and how the further removed from humans and actions and appearance an alien is, the harder they are to empathize with or relate to or engage with as an audience. For an example, think of The Color of Space by H.P. Lovecraft. In this story, the alien lacks even a physical body to relate our understandings to, and is instead a poison-like substance that infests a fictional town after a meteorite crashes there. In this story, the alien is purely an antagonistic force. There is never a point when the audience is asked to or expected to empathize towards it or find understanding in its behaviors. In contrast to this, think E.T. In design, this alien has very humanoid physical characteristics. Think of the very human eyes that it has, or the very structured body kind of situation it's got going on. Even its overall shape categorizes it more as a child, even before its wide-eyed curiosity, juvenile yet innocent mannerisms, and simple speech push it in that direction in the audience's minds. E.T. is contextualized as a humanoid child alien. As such, E.T. is inherently easy to categorize and root for, as it does not just latch onto a human understanding, but our immediate protectiveness and love for children as well. And while I love the movie E.T., it is important to understand that if an alien species is out there, they would have developed entirely outside the Earth, and thus, realistically speaking, would exist in both a physical and mental way that was beyond foreign to any part of the human species, likely beyond comprehension in most aspects as well. In storytelling, this is hard to push. This is really hard to engage with. The further removed or othered an alien is, either in design, behavior, or both, from humans, the harder it is to get the viewers or readers to feel anything towards the alien that is positive. I know that Lindsay Ellis is aware of all this because she's the one who first introduced me fully to the concepts of most of it. And so, in her book, it is so interesting to see what she does with those ideas in her own design and building of this alien and this alien species. In her book, this is not just present in the design either, but it is actually a recurring theme in how humans treat the other, which we will get back to later. Going first into what Lindsay Ellis did with this understanding, she created an image and a culture of an alien that, in my opinion, rode the line between I need this to be perceived with empathy and real aliens would look much more otherly beautifully. I also wonder if a written format assisted in pushing this line a tad more towards otherly while writing in the needed empathy. But regardless, her alien design is top tier and thoroughly thought-provoking. And as someone who has heard her talk about this topic in her videos, such as the War of Worlds / Independence Day one, and also I think it came up with the Transformers video, it was fun for me to see where she decided to take this topic. However, she does one better, as she not only has an interesting, engaging, yet othered design for her alien, she also has as one that translates into the culture, and most notably, the alien language complex and its complications as a result. I love the struggles it presents and the way it builds both within and outside available understandings. When contact and communication is being made, it is through the understanding that this is something that was very difficult to grasp. The language is not like, oh, it's just another language. Point apple. Okay, I'll say apple. Now we know what it is. The construct of this language is that it exists so fully outside of human understanding and human language, and even the sounds that humans are able to make, that translation is and has been impossible just up until this one point. And I feel like that adds a lot to what is going on. It adds a lot of weight, but it also just is a lot of fun to read about. Spoilers do apply to the next 2 points, so to skip ahead, to skip the spoilers, please skip to this point. Okay, so Cora and the alien and their relationship was another aspect of this novel that I thoroughly enjoyed. I'll keep this one brief to try and avoid as much spoilers as possible. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, go read it. My first thing that I said is that when I was reading a lot of this, I was thinking of The Shape of Water. This is not because it's a direct comparison. Do not misunderstand me. I have seen The Shape of Water, the movie, the one with the girl and the fish man, and I didn't like it very much. I could understand that it had artistic integrity, and I understand that other people did like it, and nothing against that. It is never something that I'll be like, why did you like that? That was so stupid. It just was not my shtick. For people whose thing it is, go nuts. So with this relationship in this book, we are talking about a human woman and an alien who does not really actually have an acute gender that is ever clarified. Ampersand is referred to as he by Cora, but it's under the understanding that the genders of aliens would be different from ours, and she is just using he to help her own understandings of him. Again, I do think that this might have been a really interesting and fun way to start using the they pronoun, but it's fine. The he totally works. The way it is done well. But even then, even with this not being my shtick, the relationship between Cora and the alien was still very engaging. It was easy to engage with. It was easy to want to read more, to get to the next step, to see where it's going to go. All of that was there for me, and I think that that is actually quite a feat. It exists in the foreign concept surrounding the existence of this alien. So even things like relationships, love, intimacy, they do not exist in the same forms or capacities that they would for a human being. So the development here is a unique one to explore and read about. That is what was engaging to me. The interest that I had for this relationship was enough that there was never a point when I was bored or like get on with it or not rooting for the characters. In this way, it also fully surpasses the experience presented in The Shape of Water, especially to me, it surpasses the experience of watching that movie. Still, I use that comparison because about 70-80% through this novel, I was like, hold on a minute. That was what kept popping into my head. And I was like, is this where we're going? The second and also final spoiler thing that I really liked was the Axiom. I'm just gonna read the part where the title comes in, and hopefully you can feel the static that I did when I first read it. It was beautifully done. So the paragraph goes as follows. The alien, Ampersand, is talking to Cora. Of the hundreds of life-supporting exoplanets we have discovered, none have evidence of species we considered even capable of advancing. An axiom developed that planets that support life are so competitive and dangerous that advanced civilizations can never evolve, and advancements such as ours are unlikely to the point of impossibility. Skip a little bit. You are the civilization that disproves the axiom. You would be both the greatest discovery in history of the superorganism and the greatest threat to its conception of itself as divinely unique. I love it. And I also genuinely feel like it comes up and it wraps so artistically into the themes of this novel. For me personally too, when a title, like the words of a title, tie into a story in a subtle way that also comes in after a big chunk of the book, I also wonder if she always knew that that was going to be the title or if it took a while to come up with. That's actually something I would like to know because it's good. It's a good title. Spoilers over. Okay, last point, but it is both the most important and my favorite thing that I liked. The themes. The first and most simple theme is one of human empathy in the face of the other, and the attempts of understanding the other as they are without altering who they are to match you, and if that is even possible. But, I mean, it goes right back to the quote that I just read. It talks about how to come in contact with something as intelligent as us, but so different, threatens us. It threatens our cognitive understanding of our place in the universe universe. And this speaks in real life to that exact same issue when we, as a group of people, come in contact with another group of people who also are intelligent but are different from us. It threatens our place in our cognitive understanding of our place in the world, which I will get into more. First, I need to discuss the second theme. The second theme is one that I am here for. I love it. Government control versus media freedom. To have it explored so naturally in a story too, where it holds direct consequence in either direction without one answer being shoved in your face. And honestly, the conclusion to this theme was eloquent, while also being quite optimistic. I enjoyed the optimistic answer matched with the pessimism of reality. I'm just going to read a quote that I feel like really summarized the theme towards the end and the thoughts surrounding it. The conflict going on during this quote is that Ampersand the alien wants to continue to keep things from Cora for her protection, which is the conflict of the government versus media freedom. And so he says, if I have to keep things from you or from anyone, it was for your protection and for mine. She then thinks it over and thinks maybe it had been a strategy and he had his reasons, but that didn't mean it was the right strategy. Ampersand had been correct to distrust the various government agencies. They couldn't be trusted not because of malice, but because of short-sightedness, ignorance of what they were dealing with, and sloppiness. Their messiness had landed them and the country in the chaos they found themselves in presently, but between the two of them, had any good come from his keeping secrets from her? The optimism within this is that the reason to distrust the agencies is not because of corruptness, which is actually what I personally lean more towards in my thoughts and opinions of government agencies, but is more because of, as she says, short-sightedness, ignorance, and sloppiness, which also apply a great deal. And so that's what I meant when I said a positive aspect to a very pessimistic issue. But to fully engage with the theme, of course, you gotta read the whole book because, like I said, it's very subtle, but it is there. It is there in the character of Nils a lot. It is in the character of Cora. It is just a very prominent aspect of the book while never being something that is so in your face that it takes away from all the other stuff going on in the book. So the final theme, and my favorite part of the book, is the theme of the other. Edward Said is a founder of postcolonial theory who, most notably, at least in my understandings, studied and wrote upon strategies for critique in the way Orientalism, or the Middle East to Asia, was understood by Europe. Said's principle was that othering, the us versus them complex, was used to differentiate a dominant culture from a supposedly inferior one, and this is under the understanding of the one who is deciding who is dominant and who is inferior, which is, of course, whoever's doing the writing. His argument was that the way the Middle East was studied, understood, and written about had very little to do with the Middle East, and everything to do with Europe, who, upon discovery, could only use the Middle East as a foil to understand themselves. Anything foreign was scrutinized under the principles that Europe was doing things the right way, and their foil then must be doing things the wrong way. So then the image that was constructed of the Middle East was one that was entirely decided by Europe, and is entirely a reflection of how Europe perceived itself in the face of the other, rather than any kind of image of what the other, or the Oriental, was actually like at the time. So why does this matter? Well, it matters a great deal, actually, in the real world. Edward Said was one of my most favorite people that I ever got to read about in my days of university. But more applicable to this conversation is that while reading Ellis's work, Said's theories kept coming up in my mind. Ellis uses her othered design of a being capable of complex thoughts and intelligence and pits it up against human nature and the nature of intelligence. In a conversation between our main character and the main alien, this is said: the human fascination with intelligent exoterran species focuses on their similarity to humans. Humanity is not prepared for any cultural, biological, or ideological disparities it may encounter. No species is. One species is only comprehensible to another species as it understands itself, but with all species, there are attributes one possesses that the other does not share. Where attributes are not shared, inevitably both parties will try to shape the other into a form they can understand. A big emphasis is put on the way that the stronger, more militant power of these two despairing entities will be the one who gets to shape the other. This is brought back up in chapter 39 when Amsterdam is being spoken to by another alien who says to him, "The more they learn about you, the more incomprehensible and terrifying you will become to them. But you will grow attached to them, as I see you already have, and inevitably overtake them, mold them, conform them to what you you wish them to be. Think of all of the uprisings you would need to quell, the little lives you would need to extinguish to maintain control. You would become the greatest mass murderer this planet has ever known. And I think that he is, in essence, a stand-in for this idea of what happens when you introduce something to a culture that it doesn't belong into. What I like most, I think, about this Alien book is the question posed on humanity. It almost reads as are we even ready for such contact? We haven't even been able to handle the contact with other humans very well, historically speaking. So I do not know what would happen if we ever came in contact with a species that we had superiority over or advancement over, or if they came in contact with us. And I think that is a very interesting aspect. A big part of the alien narrative that is in media is the fear of them doing to us what has been done to others. And I think what pushes my fondness for this deeper is the openness with which Ellis poses these questions. Literature, but more importantly, creative fiction that genuinely makes you think and makes you go, oh shit, that's applicable, is the highlight of the creation of shared language. For me, this is my favorite part of the entire book. So I will not engage with a 5-star rating system. I think that they are inherently very flawed in how people perceive them. So here is the system that I used. A score of 7 means that there was literally nothing wrong and it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced my entire life. I cannot think of very many books that I would ever rate as a 7. So very, very high. And then 0 is it angered me to a degree that is hard to translate into a language. So that is the disparity between 0 and 7. Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis, for me, falls between liked it and loved it at a solid 5.5 out of 7. This may seem low after everything I said, and this is because there is very little about the story and structure and plot that is my thing. I don't typically do sci-fi or even alien stuff. Saying that, it is a remarkable feat that I was still able to engage with and enjoy and appreciate the story, despite the fact that it had so little of anything that would ever make me pull it off of a shelf had I not wanted to read it because of my deep appreciation for the author. And this speaks solely and entirely to Ellis's skill. And I have no doubt that it could reach past the love it rating with a different reader. And so I would 100% suggest this to anybody who likes science fiction or who likes any of the topics that I've discussed below. For what it stands, it was $15 very well spent, and I am so excited for Ellis and this endeavor, living the dream as it were, and I look forward to what she puts out next, and I will most definitely buy it and read it. And I think that's all. I even did the little pre-order giveaway to get her autograph, and I was actually really worried that I wouldn't get it because of the Kindle version, but I guess they didn't care, so I got her autograph. So make of that what you will.